Viewers who are watching today, I'm in conversation with Averil Spencer. She is a social entrepreneur and currently the founder of Launch Girls. Averil has built and scaled mission-driven organizations that have a profound impact on girls' and women's livelihoods. She's worked with international stakeholders, nonprofit organizations, all the way to Fortune 500 companies. She's currently the founder of Launch Girls, an organization that ensures girls in emerging economies have the skills to own their futures and become bold participants in today's economy. Prior, Averil worked at Deloitte Consulting, Goldman Sachs, and you were also the co-founder, executive director, and board chair for Voice for Girls, a social enterprise that is still actively focused on empowering adolescent girls through life skills and leadership programming. I am delighted to be in conversation with you. So why don't we dive into our questions? You ready?
Thanks, Jessica. I'm thrilled to be here and always excited to talk about social impact.
Excellent. You're in the right place. So social impact is a ubiquitous term that's used in all sectors, government, corporate, nonprofit, and foundations, and is often a signal of good intention. But in many ways, the term has been diluted. You have decades of experience in social impact. How do you define the phrase?
So I define social impact as any work that creates value for communities and for societies. And so something I have been thinking actively about is just all of the different models and ways that we create social impact and define it actually. So right now, Jessica, you're right. It is a big tent that's encompassing a lot of different things. Some doing great work, others not so much. But I think we all actually are working towards the same goal. And so I think there's different ways to think about how you want to structure this social impact. And so you have, corporates and for-profit companies doing social responsibility work. You have B Corps or benefit corporations that have double or triple bottom lines around environmental social impact as well as returns. There's social enterprises, there's nonprofit work, there's nonprofits that create revenue streams. So there's so many different ways that we are organizing social impact work and different models that I think makes it really interesting, but it is a buzzword, so you just have to figure out how do you define it and what ways do you want to engage with the social impact work and how it's structured, which is, I think, a different way to think about it.
Yeah, it really is. That's such a good answer because what I'm hearing you say is that it really takes many different approaches to social impact, that there is no one straight path, and that many different solutions are required from all types of entities.
And I think that's important because whether you are a nonprofit, working for a nonprofit, leading a social enterprise in CSR, corporate social responsibility, at the end of the day, you want to make positive impact in the world. And so being able to say you're under this big umbrella within this big tent, I think actually can be beneficial when it's not such a hard, fast defined word. We're all moving towards the same goal, but we have different ways to get there and different ways to mobilize resources and capital.
Yeah, that's right. And I've seen that a lot in my work as well with corporate social responsibility. The example is exactly that you're speaking to. In your journey as a social impact leader, what are some specific challenges you've encountered, and what actionable strategies have you employed to overcome them?
So I think one of the most interesting challenges I experienced was at the beginning of my career. So I had graduated college during a time when in 2010, not many people were hiring for social impact work. And so I found myself in a social enterprise fellowship. I'd never heard the term social entrepreneurship before, but they were going to pay me to get out of my parents' house and go see the world. And so I found myself in Hyderabad, India, working as an education consultant in a low-cost private school in Hyderabad, Andhra Pradesh at that point. Living and working within the community. And, I found myself spending most of my time with adolescent girls in classes 6 through 10. And it was at this point in time when the Nike Foundation's Girl Effect campaign was moving from advocacy to action. And so we were able to receive funding from them to start a life skills program for girls in these low-cost private schools. And so started with asking girls, what do they want? What do they need? And we knew that we wanted to tackle interpersonal dynamics and relationships and health and nutrition and safety and rights and a little bit of future planning. And one thing we did not want to touch with a 10-foot pole was anything around menstruation, sexual reproductive health. We just knew they were such taboo topics in these schools. And as outsiders, coming into an environment, didn't necessarily feel comfortable saying, hey, listen, this is really needed. But as we talked to girls, as we talked to teachers in the school, this was the number one topic that came up. I remember speaking to a girl and she said, listen, we have to have information about our bodies and what's happening and menstruation, because I no longer live in a joined family. Her family used to be joined, and then her parents moved to Hyderabad. So I'm alone with my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. And I menstruated for the first time, and I had no idea what was happening. I thought I had cancer and was going to die. And she was not alone in that story. We had multiple other girls, relay versions of that story. And so we said, okay, this has to happen. So we went to the school principals and said, listen, from the girls, from teachers in your schools, they're asking for this information. How can we make this work? And the principals, again, were just very cautious because they knew parents, might not agree to it. So they said, okay, if you're seeing this is really a need, let's create the chapter, let's create the content, really make it girl focused and girl friendly, but let's have it as a removable section. So nothing is in these books that can be taken home, that might be shared with brothers or boys in the community, or where parents might misread anything. So we created a tear out chapter. And then we had a session with parents to say, listen, we're not hiding anything. This is exactly what's going to happen in these programs, in these camps. We ran camps at that point. Are you okay with this? And almost 100% of the parents, and it was really mothers, said, yes, my daughter needs to know this. For those that weren't okay with it, we let them know what days we were having these topics were being prepared, and they just kept their kids home that day. So it's really just kind of a testament to the fact that when you work within the communities, when you co-create with the girls, they know what they need. They know the problems they're facing, and they just need access to resources and help. And so that was just a challenge that really showed us, we have to listen to girls, work with girls. They need to lead the way. But then we also need to build an ecosystem of support around teachers, school leaders, parents, to make sure they get access to that information.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's kind of one of the big things that I learned, and just that, working with girls or your target population, like that's where you start. And then I guess another challenge that, Jessica, I think I'll bring up, because it's a learning edge for me right now, and it's a challenge I'm actively working through right now, is I think some of the exciting things that we're seeing in social impact, especially on the international development side. So if you're located in the global north, but you want to do work across the global south, what's your role? Funders are more and more investing in proximal leaders and driving capital and resources to smaller community-based organizations, as it should be. And so if you're a social impact leader based in the global north, but want to work on international issues, what's your role? And so that's something I'm currently looking at as we transition our leadership structure to India and have decision making based where the work is being done. And so kind of reevaluating, reimagining my role as a leader in this space is something I'm going to be exploring in 2024.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I think the story that you told was amazing and inspiring, but also a good example of what you're referring to now is like, how do you engage the community, the local teachers? These are local women who've had the experience that you were talking about, the girls sharing, and you know, now bringing it up to the top of your organization and how you can actually make more community-centric decisions. I think that's a question that a lot of people who work in the Global South are asking themselves. And it will be interesting to see, where the tides go.
Yeah, yeah.
So you founded successful social enterprises over the course of your career. We're talking about Launch Girls, and you also founded Voice for Girls. You also just shared a success story that started out as a challenge, but can you share a success story where your efforts led to meaningful social impact?
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is why we do this work. So I would say, I think from my bio, you can tell my passion is working with adolescent girls. I think they're at this really important turning point in their lives where the decisions, they're starting to be treated like adults, and yet the decisions they make now can have ripple effects and repercussions for the rest of their lives. So, how do we help them stay in school and then after school, safely earn incomes? And so that's really the focus of what we're looking at Launch Girls is how do we create scalable economic empowerment programming with a gender lens for these girls that can adapt locally, scale globally, and be implemented by community-based organizations that girls trust, that already do programming in the area, but don't have programming around economic opportunity, entrepreneurship, developing plans for girls' futures. So that's kind of the caveat of what we're doing at Launch Girls specifically, because some of our successes lately have been just so amazing with our community partners. So these local girls serving organizations, one of our champion partners is WeSad, and they operate in Cameroon, and they've been running our Girl Boss program for since about 2021 now. And so they've had iterations of girls going through this program. And this past year, 2023, was the first year they piloted our clubs program. So this is a peer-led kind of a continued education after the more formal Girl Boss program. And so they had a champion, and he worked with the girls and said, listen, part of clubs is creating a community project. What do you all want to work on? So they sat together and talked and realized that there had been a lot of discussion within larger WeSat programming around environmental conservation. And so one of the things they were seeing is women in their community were cutting down trees for firewood, and they wanted to try to find a way to mitigate that. And so they took it back to their champion and to the WeSad leadership team and said, listen, this is the challenge we want to work on. And one of our, main girl boss champions there, Helvetia, said, I've learned about this briquette made in Kenya that burns hotter, lasts longer, doesn't have the environmental degradation that chopping down firewood does. It's less smoke. And so she and the girls created a proposal for this briquette making business and took it to the WeSad board. And the board approved buying a briquette maker from China. So they're currently importing it. And they're going to start a briquette business with the girls being the main points of sale, going out into the community, educating women why these briquettes are better than chopping down trees. And she has dubbed them the Green Girl Bosses because they are focused on, running and building this business, but also with a climate perspective as well. So
That's,
yeah.
it's so interesting too, because, now it's the children who are teaching the adults. And oftentimes, like in the traditional setting, like you're talking about, it doesn't really work like that, or it hasn't in the past. And I think just even across the world, we're seeing the younger generations coming up and trying to solve a lot of these problems. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to see the generations flipped and the young folks challenging the status quo and coming up with solutions. But
And
especially
then
in a community where girls are often marginalized.
and how they have this power, they have these ideas, but we also can't just say, okay, go do it all on your own. There still is support and scaffolding and resources that they're going to need from adults, from mentors, from people in their communities. And so part of what we're also actively looking at is who can be those champions for girls. How do they learn how to ask for what they need, and who do they go to? Because I do think we are evolving past this idea of, you just educate a girl, you just empower her, and she'll change the world. Yes, she has all the potential to do that, but making her do it all on her own is not fair. And so, how can we create linkages and support systems and help girls connect the dots from what they're seeing and what they want to change to what they can actually do?
Yeah, it's a very holistic approach. I mean, it really sounds like a successful model. What valuable lessons and wisdom do you have for aspiring female social impact leaders who want to make significant impact in society?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this. So I would say a career in social impact is not always the easiest or most straightforward. I think if you're coming out of the university system, there's machinery around certain types of jobs, in different economies. There's just recruiting processes and a lot of support that you can get, and that's not always the case in social impact. So I would say figure out what gets you going. What do you want to jump out of bed every morning, or most mornings? It doesn't, not every morning, but most of the time. What do you want to jump out of bed and start thinking about, and what problems do you want to solve? Can you start to isolate where do you draw energy from? Is it a type of problem? Is it doing a type of work? So, is it working with adolescent girls or women? Is it farmers and solving issues that they're facing? Or is it strategy? Do you love any type of problem, but you want to just really dig in and think about solutions? Are you great with people? Do you want to build out HR and manage people? Because, oh my gosh, in the social impact nonprofit space, people management, retention, growth. Oh, so much can be done there. Anyway, figure out what you want to do. And then I would say network. The best thing to do to break into social impact, to find the jobs or the work that you want to do, is find the people doing the work that you think you want to do and connect with them. And Jessica, I cannot say how pleasantly surprised I have been by people responding to cold outreaches via email or LinkedIn. I would say about 7 times out of 10, 70% of the time, people will respond, and you can get, a 30-minute call with them to pick their brain, or you can find ways to collaborate. Jessica, that's how we connected. And then I think my final piece of advice would be opportunities are out there. You have to be open to seeing them for the opportunities they are and willing to take a risk and jump. And I would say the biggest pivots in my career have been from being offered opportunities and taking them. And so I think, I told you about IDEX and, moving to India and working in a low-cost private school. While I was there, we were connected to the Nike Foundation and were able to implement a grant for them. And so it's, even if you think you're not qualified, take on these opportunities. You're going to learn on the job. you can make it happen. And so taking that, and then, recently with Launch Girls, I was connected to, amazing women who helped bring this idea to life. But I had to quit my job at Deloitte. I had to quit my very stable consulting job and take a huge risk. And so it's not for everyone. My career path is definitely full of twists and turns and privilege and right place, right time. I do want to acknowledge that, but it's also just being willing to take that jump and say, this might work out and it might not, but I trust myself to be able to navigate through the process. And if it doesn't, there are other options and opportunities.
Right. I love that. I think risk taking is such an important part, of social impact careers, but any career really, if you're really
Yeah,
interested in following your passion. And also it's just about showing up, just say yes. Because no doesn't really get us anywhere.
exactly. You never know where that yes is going to lead you. And it might be months or even a couple years before you truly see the bigger picture, but it generally is something pretty spectacular.
Right. Well, given your twists and turns and also the rapidly evolving landscape of social impact, what are your predictions for the future of advancing positive change?
So I just have so much hope because of this next generation of leaders that I'm seeing coming up, and just the way that this, industry or system, this big tent is really thinking about where are we investing capital and resources? Who should be the people doing the work? What are people's different roles? Because we all have a role to play. I think, Jessica, this does come back to that earlier challenge I was saying of, what is my role as, someone, based in the global north, but doing a lot of my work in the global south. I'm reimagining that. And I think people being humble and putting ego aside and really taking stock of the work that they're doing, how they're doing it, and how are they supporting people, in different parts of the world who are closer, and I say work a lot, but to the work that we're doing, is really incredible. It's not easy, it's hard, but I think it's really worthwhile. And it's, something I mentioned we're doing at Launch Girls. And, it just really excites me for how much more realistic and impactful the solutions that are coming out and the investments that are being made are going to be.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few years, and it's been refreshing to see that, funders are thinking about different ways to make change with their funds and how receptive, those who need the funds to operate and make that change have been. But yeah, it remains to be seen how the next few years go too.
Yeah. And I will say there's a lot of talk right now. Talk doesn't always translate to action, but it's the first step. And we are seeing very slowly that action is taken. So that gives me hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining today. It's been amazing to hear about your background and experience and your advice. And I hope you have a great day. And I'm excited to see the future for Launch Girls.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Take care.
You too.